Welcome to On My Way to Wealth, the podcast where busy Gen Xers can learn financial tips as they navigate life on their way to wealth. And now, please join your host, Luis Rosa.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of On My Way to Wealth. My name is Luis, and I'm your host. This is a special Hispanic Heritage Month edition episode. Hispanic Heritage Month takes place from September 15th to October 15th every year, and it's a time to recognize, celebrate the many contributions, culture, and extensive histories of the American Latino community. It first began as Hispanic Heritage Week in 1968, and later on became Hispanic Heritage Month in 1988. Since then, the month has celebrated nationwide through festivals, art shows, conferences, community gatherings, and much more. The reason it starts on September 15th is because it celebrates the independence of several Latin American countries, including Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua on September 15th, Mexico on September 16th, and Chile on September 18th. It also includes holidays that recognize Hispanic contributions, such as the Virgin Islands Puerto Rico Friendship Day, which is celebrated in the U.S. Virgin Islands the second Monday in October. For this month, I'd like to highlight individuals who have made a great contribution in their chosen profession and their community at large. So now I'd like to introduce you today to our very special guest, Vanessa Martinez. Welcome.
I just learned so much. Thank you for sharing all of that, all of those other details.
Same here. When I was researching the history behind it, I'm like, that's amazing. Well, thank you for being on the show, Vanessa.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, appreciate it. Well, I wanted to, going to highlight some of the stuff that you do so that people know. So you have an MBA, right? You're also the CEO and founder of Empowered Network, and you bring over 15 years of experience in wealth assessment and guidance. You have been named Barrons' Top 100 Women Advisor in 2020 and 2022, Forbes Top Women Wealth Advisors 2020 and 2021, Forbes Best in State 2021 and 2022. And you're dedicated to building meaningful relationships with your clients and help them pass on a legacy rooted in strong values, which led you to co-author a book called Family Values at Risk, Inclusive Communications to Pass on Your Family's Wealth and Legacy. In a nutshell, right?
Oh, that was a lot.
We're very impressive. So I wanted to ask you about, in general, just your upbringing first and then your career path.
Well, I would say I'm very fortunate that I have such supportive parents, and the thing that was repeated constantly in my household was education, right? And it's because it's one of those things that no one can take away from you. You can build materialistic things, and those can get taken away, but education is yours to keep forever. So it was so important, and I love that so much. My mother, born and raised in Guatemala, and my father, born and raised in El Salvador, and they met here in Chicago and had us 3 wonderful daughters. But that was the key piece in being raised by them, like do your homework and do this. And you typically think that whatever is pushed upon you sometimes tends to be that piece that you're like, oh, I don't even want it anymore, right? But it was the opposite in our household. We love learning. We love going to school, hence continuing on to doing my MBA, my sister to getting her, PhD in psychology. So it's those pieces of, I think that the more you repeat and are constant in your life as a parent for your children, those values that you pass on, they truly do receive them. If it's kind of like the good intention and the consistency and intentionality of what you do. And they definitely did that with us, and I love them for it.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. When you were talking about the importance of education, how it was like drilled onto you, it reminded me of part of my upbringing as well. My parents never even finished 8th grade. And that was the pillar of what they wanted us to do, was get educated and do better than they feel like they did for themselves. So they came from Dominican Republic, and all 6 of us siblings got to come here, get an education, right? And graduate beyond what they accomplished, right? So we did college, and some became doctors and lawyers, and I'm a financial planner and so on, right? And it's amazing. And I love what you say, because it's true. Like, material wealth can come and go, but you could rebuild if you kept the educational stuff, all those values that you were basically taught at home, right? Education starts at home. So I could really appreciate that.
I think it's so important what you just said, that your parents got to 8th grade. So my mother only got to 3rd grade because she had to work. My father was a little more fortunate and he got to finish high school. But then look at what they created, right? I think this is Hispanic Heritage Month, right? This is the core to, if you plant the seed, there will be fruits to bear. And we just need to make sure that as the seed was planted from our ancestors, now it's time for us to make sure we're planting that good seed for our future generations.
Yeah, I love that. That's the legacy right there. You know, that could have been possible without their initial sacrifice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what led you to ultimately get into financial services?
I think that ended up being because I enjoy finance so much. When I did my undergrad, so I was born and raised in Chicago, and college, I did it abroad. I decided to go back to my mom's home country, and I got my undergrad in La Universidad de San Carlos de Guatemala.
Oh, wow.
And while I was out there, I had a professor that it was finance, and he was great. He was my strictest professor and very on top of it. And if I turned in an assignment and there was something on it on the front page that wasn't good, he was like, if you don't review your own work, I'm not going to review your work. And I'm like, oh my goodness, he was so, adamant about it being right. But as I had more conversations with him, one of the biggest pieces is whatever you're good at is what you could share with your community, right? So I always call myself a server. I love to help other individuals. And what's the best thing that I can help with is something that I enjoy and something that I'm good at. So I feel that if I was given a gift that I do enjoy finances, I do understand it, and I do well with it, why wouldn't I share that with others? So that's kind of how it went. It's not like I was young and I was like, I want to be a financial advisor when I grow up. I don't think that was the case.
I've yet to meet the person that told me that.
It's just not out there enough, though. I can honestly tell you, who was it? Oh my goodness, it was so funny. I was reading an article that if you look up all the Barbies or all the Barbie dolls, there's not a financial advisor Barbie doll. There's a business Barbie doll, but not financial advisor. Yet there's veterinary. There's any other thing you can think of, but not advisor. So Barbie needs to pick it up a pace. But
there, for sure, we'll get the CFP board to do some outreach.
Yes.
Oh, that's so cool. So who were some of the most influential people in your life as you were just coming up, and going to school and all that?
So it was funny when we first talked about doing this podcast, I went through and just thinking that thought of that question. It is such a difficult question to answer because you feel like, ooh, do I have to select a person? Do I have to select a couple people? And the more I thought about it, it was a lot of people. It was my community in general.
It's a village, right?
Yes, it is a village. It's who you surround yourself with, and making those decisions of who you let in and who you don't let in, right? I think that is what truly brought me to where I am today, right? That one professor that had that stern conversation with me, right? My parents that, made sure that they gave me that thought of education is so important. My sisters for having supported me throughout hard times in life, those friendships, those friends that we call family, right? So I think it's that community that we surround ourselves in is truly what takes us to that next level. Because if you think of, there's moments where I'm like, oh my goodness, being an entrepreneur, right? You're like, you feel alone on an island and you're like, do I really want to do this anymore? Is it all worth it? Can I keep going? But
it's not just me then that feels that way.
Call me, Luis. I will help you. having that team of people that you know you can count on, that understand you, that feel you, that know where you've been and where you're going. And I think that's one of the main reasons how you and I got connected, right? Being part of this committee and this summit that we've created, right? There's 9 of us creating this Ser Latino Advisor Summit. It's to build that community, because the more of us that come together, I think the faster we'll achieve that growth and success together.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I love what you're saying about kind of having that filter of being very strategic behind who you're allowed to be in your circle. And I think it's important because a lot of the times we hang out with people just because we happen to be in the same geographical location or something, like, especially growing up, right? Like, you don't get to choose necessarily who your neighbors are or your classmates and so on. So, when you're talking about having those people around you, it sounds like you were also very conscious of who it is that you actually were allowing to be in your circle. Is that correct?
Yes, I know that sounds a little harsh, but there are some people that, as you grow over time, I think it comes with age too. Now, don't call me old, but I do feel that as you get hurt along the way in life with experiences that teach you lessons, right? So this is good stuff because it's teaching you, but you also learn when to stop giving so much. Again, I come from the server mentality of helping, but I've learned over time with therapy that therapy is a good thing for everyone who's listening, right? Mm-hmm. It's not the old school mentality that, oh, you got to be crazy if you're going to a therapist. I don't believe that. I hope that more people actually come to someone with this, objective advice that they give you, because then you get to truly make those decisions of what makes me feel good. If, for those listening, think about those instances where you're in a place. It could be unfortunate, it could be work, right? It could be home, it could be church, it could wherever you're at. And you get that feeling of discomfort with certain people. Why would you let yourself keep staying in those situations, right? That's where you have to learn, 1, is it them? Or 2, is it you? Right? Because I want to put that out there too. Sometimes we like to say, oh, I don't want my kid playing with your kids. But at the same time, is your kid the problem? So in this case, not your kid, but is it you? Are you overly competitive? Are you overly perfectionist? Are you, right? That self-awareness is what will truly allow you to grow in your life, personally, business-wise, but being self-aware of what I need, what I want, and that will make that community that you select.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. When I was growing up, I remember my parents always warned me to be careful of who I hung out with, right? Especially when we came to New York, because I lived in Washington Heights in Uptown Manhattan. It was New York City. And the neighborhood had a very, it was mostly Dominican, right? But you had immigrants like myself. Then you had people that were born and raised in the US, so they were of Dominican descent. But just a few feet away, like, you could have someone dealing drugs. And like, I could be hanging out in the stoop with my friends. Nothing to do with it, right? But from the cops' perspective, it would be like, we're like 5 feet away from each other or something, right? Like, they don't know the difference, right? And they always warn me about that. Like, be careful who you hang out with. And then as I grew, I realized there was even more to it. Like, they were right, because your network is your net worth. And when you look at it, even from a financial standpoint, like, they say that you're the average, like, of the 5 people you hang out with, right? And I think you could apply that to a lot of things that help you level up in your life. So ultimately, like, no matter how disciplined you are, like, if you hang out with 4 people that all they do is eat sweets, for example, like, at some point you're going to try a chocolate bar or a lollipop, right? Like, it's just bound to happen, right? So you got to be very intentional depending on what your goals and your values are.
I remember my mom used to always say that the saying, dime con quién andas y te diré quién eres.
Yep.
So tell me who you surround yourself with, and I'll tell you who you are, which is hurtful. And when you're a kid, I'm like, no, that's not true, because I will always be a leader and I won't do what they tell me to. And I won't, of course, because I was a little bratty child. But exactly what you're saying, if you hang out with people, right, that have a glass of wine, right? If I used to be, I like tequila and some squirt. I'm a paloma drinker, right? That's my favorite drink. But if you start hanging around with people who always drink wine, guess what? You're going to start drinking wine. It's just going to happen because you're going to taste it, and then you're slowly going to learn to enjoy it, right? Then you become a wine snob, and it just happens, right? It's true. It happens. And this is why, exactly what you're saying, building that extensive community, because there are people who want to be helpful, right? The mentor-mentee situation. I think we should all, if we can, be both at all points and times in our lives.
Yeah, I'm a big believer of that. And mastermind, which is one of the reasons why I love the community that we're building, like with the Search Summit, because you're going to get to develop relationships, like friendships with people there that could turn into something else, even like a mastermind group or study group later on, so that you can get to share, the trials, and also get to celebrate some wins too, because it could be pretty lonely if you're building the business by yourself too. You're kind of on an island. Even if you work for a company, you still you still have your own business in a sense, right? Because you're building your clientele.
Yep.
So it could feel very lonely. So let's talk a bit about the Empowered Network. Then, what was the origin story, and what led you to create it?
With Empowered Network, again, we go back to the networking, right? And building a community. There is a bit of a gap in the community building when it comes to women in finance. And on both sides of the panel, right? If you're sitting at a table on the advisor side, there's a lack of women, as well as on the investor side. I remember in my old practice, it was typically sitting with a man at the other end of the table. And then I slowly had to integrate the pieces of the value of bringing in your wife to the conversation so we can deepen and evolve this, right? Because wealth management is not just about investing dollars. And I'm so glad that the world is slowly evolving to understand those, not just say them, right? Because we can all say a lot, but we don't do a lot. So I'm glad that it is slowly transitioning into that, which adds those pieces that I mentioned so often. It's values, right? Those values, not just valuables, but values. Because when you think of families that are creating wealth that to me means values are incorporated into that.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you're passing on to your children, which means you have to share it with them. Too many times we think, oh, I lead by example, right? If I wake up early, my kids know that means waking up early is a thing. It's one of my values. They don't know it's a thing. They know that you do it. That doesn't mean that you've explained to them the purpose and the whys of that.
Yeah.
As well as talking about the struggles, right? Listening to, and I dig deep with my parents, right? Which there is really, really sad stories in our history, all of our history, right? Mm-hmm. Pain and suffering, right? And poverty. And when I dig into those stories, I want to learn them because I want to feel them, because I want to do better. And in Empowered Network, the goal is to incorporate those pieces together. Let's not just help you and consult on how and what you should be doing with the numerical side of your balance sheet, but also with the emotional IQ, right? Like, what are you doing with those pieces? Because like they say, right? Money doesn't buy happiness. That's 100% true. But people who don't have as much money say, oh, but I bet if I had $1 million, I'd be happier than I am now. Would you? That's the problem. All of those pieces need to be integrated. And that is the purpose of Empowered Network. the integration of values and valuables in a community space. So besides one-on-one consulting, there's webinars that we have and workshops. Honestly, the in-person workshops, it's truly like motivational to have them, not just, and this is one of the great pieces I think of what we do, and I'm sure you feel this as well. It's not just what we deliver to the families that we help, but what they give us, right? It's not just the joy to see their families succeed, but the learning lessons, right? We honestly get the best job in the world. We get to learn from other people's mistakes. We've learned now, okay, they did it that way. Ooh, let's not do it that way. So now we get to share all that with the next family and then with the next family. And, so it's like this wonderful cycle of making everyone better.
Yeah, no, it's one of the things I love about this path, because you can also, if you have a long enough relationship with clients, you also get to see their wins as well, right? And the result of all the hard work that went behind it, which is great to continue to share that as well with others and pass that on. So I know that you wrote a book as well, right? Family Value at Risk. Is that some of the same, like basically concept that you incorporate into the book as well with family values? And
yes, it's the risk, right? The family values that are at risk isn't necessarily the valuables, but the values that get lost along the way for the next generation. They're at risk if you don't have that inclusive, right, including the partners, type of communication. We need to share it. And I think the old school mentality is, if you made money as the matriarch and patriarch of the family, that you don't necessarily need to share that with your kids, because you say, oh, then they're going to be lazy. So I don't want to tell them how much I'm giving them, right? That's one thought. Or the other thought is, oh, if I share it with them, is that going to put a burden on them of the level of responsibility that's going to fall on them? I don't want to burden my children, so I won't share it. So there's multiple reasons why sometimes families don't share. The problem with that is it's not helpful to the next generation, right? You can think, oh yeah, I mean, who wouldn't want love to get a $4 million check after, families pass? That's great. Isn't that? If when I was 40, I needed it. Now I'm 65 and receiving it. So it skipped the time I needed it.
Yeah.
Right. So I've had those cases where it is kind of, wow, they saw me struggle and we didn't talk about that. Right. But sometimes because the parents are scared for multiple reasons to do it. But I think if the more communication, right? And we know that that's the answer to everything. Better communication solves all problems in the world.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think it's sometimes money is such a taboo, especially like in the Hispanic culture. I find that some people, when it comes to like estate planning, they don't even want to talk about the possibility of death. It's like taboo. Is like, I don't want to jinx myself. So the topic of just protecting your assets or your family, right? Life insurance and setting up a trust or a will. It's like, no, you guys figure it out when I'm gone, right?
Yeah. I talk about it very matter of fact. And it's not, I'm one of the most emotional people you'll meet, right? And I consider that a strength, not a weakness, that I'm emotional. But this is part of life. We're all going to die, right? Taxes and death, two things you can't avoid. It's going to happen. So let's talk about the positive side of that. I won't be here, but this and this will be here. And I already have it set up for you. And this is how it's going to work. And this is what you need to do. And this is what you don't need to do. So I think if we talk about it more as just a fact that's happening, it makes it a little easier than harping on the piece that when they die, maybe we skip the when they die or when they pass or when they're no longer here. We skip over that. We know that already happened. And now let's just talk about communication, right? What are those values that we're going to talk about that need to be passed, that need to be organized? Where is it? How does it work?
Yeah,
It's hard.
absolutely. And, going back to some of the stuff you were saying about when you were working in the past, when you had like just dealing with the male figure, right? Like, I find that is quite the flaw in our industry. And, it still happens to this day where, I hear of statistics like 74% of widows like fire their current financial advisors because they weren't really being included the entire time, which is just a travesty to me,
Yeah. I can't tell you how many stories I've had. And I see two parts to that, right? I always like to put myself in the other person's shoes. There's two sides to that. Sometimes that could be that the male decided not to share with the spouse because they thought she was disinterested. It could be that. Sometimes they just wanted to take the lead and didn't want to share, whatever their reasoning. But it could be the opposite, that sometimes the wife just is disinterested and doesn't want to do it. But what I tell all the couples that I work with, it's your responsibility, right? There's things that you enjoy and there's things you don't. Either way, you have to do it. That's where I'm at, right? This is not an option. You go to the doctor because you have to go to the doctor. So you go to your advisor because you have to. And that doesn't mean that my husband goes for me because they can't do my blood work on him.
Right.
They can't test all of his organs, mine through him. They can't. So I have to be present. And this also leads to the other side, right? That sometimes when you sit with the advisor and they're sitting there telling you, well, I think the Federal Reserve is going to raise interest rates one more time before the end of the year. And talking to someone like that, I mean,
that's terrible.
75% of the people on this planet are not going to want to listen to what you have to say. So you need to talk to people how they learn, right? It's the golden rule and the platinum rule. The golden rule, which is the rule in the past, is do unto others as you'd like done unto you. That is not the greatest rule. The greatest rule is do unto others as they'd like done unto them, right? You can tell me, oh, Vanessa, I love coffee. Let me bring you coffee. And I'm like, I told you, I drink tea. Stop bringing me coffee, right? So we have to talk to people how they learn. We have to make sure they're listening.
Yeah, meet them where they're at. I like that, the platinum rule. I hadn't heard that one before. That's pretty cool. So going back to your upbringing, was like Spanish the first language spoken in the household as you were growing up?
Yes.
Gotcha. And then you were born and raised here?
I was born and raised in Chicago.
Gotcha. And then did you know both English and Spanish at the same time, or you were like forced to speak Spanish in the house first and then you learn English later when you went to school?
Yes. So in the house, we could only speak Spanish, but then as soon as the first one went to kindergarten, they had to learn English. And then what happens with the siblings is as soon as the first one goes to school, they come home speaking this weird language that now the younger siblings are like, wait, what? But then we quickly all go to kindergarten. The kids always speak English to each other, but it was prohibited to speak to my mother and father in English. You had to talk to them in Spanish.
Yeah. I find now I have nephews and nieces. I find like some of that is getting lost a little, where now like my nephews and nieces all speak English and maybe they understand Spanish or they might answer in a few Spanish, but I feel like their preferred language is English, so I feel like by the time they have kids, like it's probably all going to be gone,
It is so true. And it is very sad. I had the advantage that my father worked for American Airlines. So because he worked there, he got those tickets that you can get, right? That you pay the taxes on, but then you don't pay the full ticket because he's an employee that works with a family. So we got to travel to Central America as young kids. And because that was their home country and their neighboring countries, we got to spend time with my mom's side of the family. And then we'd it was like an hour away. That's so funny, right? That they'd meet in Chicago, all the way over here, and they lived an hour apart from Guatemala and El Salvador. Their house.
Yeah, that's something.
But we had to speak Spanish because all of my cousins out there spoke Spanish. So now what we had in our household was approximately 9 months of English and 3 months of Spanish. So that forced us to also be more in tune with our Latino culture.
Yeah. And you went to college, so you had to be all in Spanish there.
Oh, man.
Wow.
Hard.
I can't even imagine. That's hard.
Looking to like talk Spanish in the house, right? But it's a whole other thing. And out there, college is a serious thing.
Yeah, the grammar, like everything's got to be on point.
Intense. So that took some time. And it also gave me a new appreciation for immigrants from any other country, right? Like how they want you come here and you're obligated to speak English. If you want people to understand, you're obligated to speak English. And it's funny, your accent is funny if it isn't an American accent. Mm-hmm. So out there, I was the American, right? With my thick Latino accent. They're like, that's not even how you say it. And that's not how you do it. I mean, to this day, there are specific words that are very difficult for me because I learned the majority of what you learn, like your vocabulary gets really intense and fortified when you're in college, right? Yeah. These are the big words that you're learning. I learned them in Spanish. So sometimes for me, coming back, well, I got my MBA, but still it's difficult sometimes to fully express myself depending on my mood for the day in each language.
Yeah, that's so funny. And you brought me back because I was thinking about what you just said about when you went back there, you were the American, and I felt the same. Like when I visited Dominican Republic, like you no longer fit in because now you lived in the US all these years. So, but I'm still Dominican according to me, right? But not to them, But then when I'm in the US, I'm not American either, because I have an accent and I came from Dominican Republic, and I'm like, I don't fit in either group now anymore.
Oh my God. So funny that you say that, because that's exactly the first presentation at our conference. Ni de aquí, ni de allá. That's exactly what we're going to dive really deep in.
I love that. I'm looking forward to that one. That's so true.
Yep. All of us.
Oh, not from here, not from there. So I know, you mentioned mentorship, and I love how you mentioned how we should both be like mentors and mentees. And I know you do a lot of volunteer work with like your church. Can you tell us a bit of the work that you do there?
Well, there I help more in kind of the planning and community side of building for the church. I'm also a Sunday school teacher, so it just allows me. I know.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Which is good. The best way to read the Bible is you have to read the Bible because I have to teach the lesson.
Yeah.
So it keeps me on my toes. I love it. And I learn so much from these kids because I have kind of the pre-teen years. I have from 10 to 13. Boy, oh boy, do they ask questions. So that I volunteer. I do that every Sunday. But I also am part of the planning committee, and part of the planning committee and the financial side is helping not just the church, but the members. So I do once a year, it's about 2 months that every Sunday before church, I go in an hour early and we do a session on like credit cards or mortgages or all of those pieces. And I do it in Spanish because my church is Spanish. So I kind of make some slides for them and just help them understand what is a budget, how does it work, right? Those pieces that no one taught them, right? No one taught our ancestors those pieces. They just learned along the way. So I just, give my time. It's fun. It's fun. It's fulfilling.
I love that. Yeah. I remember, when we first came to the US, like, it was, in addition to learning a new language, we also had to learn a new system. So my parents initially, they got paid by check, and everything got done at the check cashing place. You went there, cash your check, right? You paid like $4 at the time, which if percentage wise was huge, and then you got money orders for everything there, and you pay the electric, and they had there was never I don't remember them depositing money into a bank account. It was like cash your check and then just go buy money orders to pay all these bills, And then as I started getting jobs and my siblings, then we realized oh, no, you could have a bank account and you can write a check and not have to pay the $4 fee at the check cashing place, because all those things add up, Yep. But it's crazy how something as simple as that, and eventually creating online accounts for my parents so I could just pay their cell phone bill online, and not have to mail a stamp, and just those little things like that, they add up to so much money over that time. But we didn't know any better until we just had to learn the hard way.
Yeah.
I'm so happy you're doing that.
I know. We all need to learn those pieces. But this is why I like what you're saying, that we all need to kind of be a mentor and mentee. It's both sides of that, right? Anything that you've learned that you can share with someone who doesn't know it, right? And then it's a cycle. So we should make sure that we're sharing and that we're learning from others. We just have to make sure we're doing both pieces, right? There's so much information out there that we have to be a better generation each time. It makes sense.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. To make the next generation even better. It doesn't mean they have to have it easier, like you were saying, right? But just better, have more resources. I love that a lot. So I wanted to ask you a couple of rapid fire questions. They're going to be fun. So one of them is your favorite Latin cuisine or dish.
I like, it's called pollo en pepián. I know every country has their own pepián. In Guatemala, it's pumpkin seeds, sesame seeds. So you toast them and then put them in the blender with tomatoes and other, onions and a whole bunch of other stuff. And you let the chicken boil in that sauce. It's my favorite.
Wow. And what do you have it with? Rice or anything like that?
Yeah. So you do, white rice, and then you pour the sauce and the chicken over that.
Ooh, that sounds delicious.
It made me hungry.
All right. Favorite música or artist?
Ooh, that's a hard one. Dang it. Man, I'm just romantic.
Well, you listen to boleros and stuff?
I do like that. I like, you'll like this. I like Juan Luis Guerra.
Oh, yeah. He's a classic.
He is a classic. Ricardo Montaner, right? I'm very old school with.
I remember that. I grew up on Ricardo Montaner. Also, this guy, last name Castro, I forgot his first name.
No.
Christian Castro.
Ricardo
Ricardo Montaner, Luis Miguel, all those guys.
Love them.
I love it. And then another thing I wanted to ask you was, because I know you're big into values, generational wealth and stuff. So if you were in an elevator with someone for a very short ride, right? They don't know who you are. They don't know your website. What is something that you would like to share with them as a takeaway of things that you've learned, basically life advice?
I would say that success isn't quantified by the dollars you have or your titles or awards or all of that. I believe success is found when you know that you're giving to others. That's success. When I can see, or when you can see in yourself that you're helping others and giving to others, then you're successful.
Gotcha. I love it. Yeah, thank you. This has been great. Yeah. So what's next, or anything else you'd like to share with us?
Well, lots. But one thing I can share is I am in the middle of writing my second book.
Nice.
And I'm super excited about it. I know that finance isn't considered very fun, kind of like the topic, right? And there's multiple book groups or book clubs that I'm part of. And of course, all the books are different kind of novels and fiction. And I'm always like, man, I never think of that, right? That what I'm going to write about is nonfiction and will probably be part of book clubs, right? But I always say that the purpose for me in writing isn't necessarily, isn't period, to become rich off the proceeds of the book, because they're very far few and in between that happens to. It's more so because I want to help, that if I have to sit with each person to tell them how important it is to over-communicate, to share your values, to plan for the future, right? To create short goals, all these wonderful things, I'd never make it to the end, right? I can't sit with every single person. And I believe that a book can do that. A book can reach more people. And that means that I'm able to help more people.
Yeah, I love that. Well, we're going to have you back when the book is out so we can talk about it and help promote it.
Yeah, it'll be great.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. This has been great. I really appreciate you taking the time to come share with us in the audience. I'm going to put any links you'd like to share in the show notes, but for those listening and watching, where can we find you on social media or online?
So on both LinkedIn and Instagram, it's Vanessa.N.Martinez.
All right. Awesome. We'll put those in the show notes. Thank you very much. I'm very excited to see you at the SIR Summit, the inaugural SIR Summit. I'm just super pumped to have so many Latino advisors and aspiring advisors in the same room at the same time. So you can learn more about it at sirsummits.com. The final day of registration is September 15th. So this episode initially dropped on September 13th. So there's still time to register if you're listening to it when it first dropped.
Yay! Excited.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. You have a great one, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for tuning in. Stay tuned for some other great guests during Hispanic Heritage Month. As always, if you have any questions, send me an email, luis@onmywaytowealth.com. Thank you for listening to On My Way to Wealth. If you have any questions, please send me an email at luis@onmywaytowealth.com. The information provided here is for information and education purposes only. The opinions expressed herein are solely those of myself, unless otherwise specifically cited. Material presented is believed to be from reliable sources, and no representations are made by my firm or myself about other parties' information or accuracy or completeness. All information or ideas provided should be discussed in detail with a financial advisor, accountant, or legal counsel prior to implementation. Thank you.